The Yaroslav Askarov trade is finalized, and hopefully for the Nashville Predators, that means the drama is over. But did the Predators win the trade, and what is their outlook for the coming season? And Kimmel joins us to talk about that and more next on the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Gil Martin here, and welcome everybody to the Monday edition of the Locked On NHL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On NHL your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the show the co-host of Locked On Predators and Kimmel. And hasn't exactly been a quiet summer in the Music City, but I guess Predators fans and the Predators organization a little relieved to put the Yaroslav Askarov situation behind them.
It has been a very active offseason, and of course, extra drama last week when Yaroslav Askarov said that he wanted to be traded and would not report to AHL camp. Fortunately, that situation wrapped up on Friday afternoon with the trade to the San Jose Sharks. So that is one storyline that we can close the chapter on before we kick off a wild training camp.
And I mean, from what we understand, the team did not initiate this. Askarov kind of set all of this in motion. First of all, are you pleased with the return that Barry Trotz got in this trade?
I do think that it is a good return. I will say that it is not a glamorous return. And I think a lot of Nashville Predators fans felt like Yaroslav Askarov was going to bring a glamorous return. And this may not be flashy on paper, but it is exactly what you want to get when you're trading away your first round pick. You want to get a first round pick back. And they got a first round pick in the 2025 draft. They also got a first rounder, a late first round pick in David Edstrom. They also got goaltender Magnus Krona, who fills a vacancy left as Yaroslav Askarov kind of leaves the team. And he sort of steps into that 3A, 3B role that the Predators were going to have to fill. So on paper, I think this really looks like a solid trade for the Nashville Predators. Again, unglamorous, but I think it fits the bill for what Barry Trotz really wanted to get back in a deal like this.
Now, there were conditions on the 2025 pick. What were the conditions and how likely are they to be met?
This is Vegas Golden Knights pick. And so everybody in San Jose and in Nashville are praying for the downfall of the Vegas Golden Knights so that they can get a top 10 pick. We're going to have to wait and see how that all sorts out after this season. But this will be, regardless of where it falls in the first round, Nashville will have 3 first round picks in the 2025 draft. 5 picks in the top 70 picks in the 2025 draft. So they are set up very, very nicely with some draft capital. And that's something that may come into play depending on how the season goes at the trade deadline for Barry Trotz.
You mentioned Barry Trotz. It's now been a little more than a year since he took over as the GM. Assess his strengths and weaknesses after 1 year as a general manager, because he's been a coach a long time, but he's new to this particular position.
It's been really interesting to watch him transition from a longtime head coach to a general manager because it is a very different perspective. But I do think his experience as a head coach weighs in on some of these decisions that he now has to make as a general manager. And I do think this Yaroslav Askarov situation highlights that potentially. Because Barry Trotz has been a coach, one of the things that he values very much is locker room culture and relationship among the team. And I feel like as this Yaroslav Askarov situation began to snowball, it really became evident to Barry Trotz, the general manager, that wrapping this up ahead of training camp was the best thing to do for the franchise, both in Nashville and in Milwaukee. And he was very fortunate to be able to put together, I think, a deal that both parties walked away from Friday afternoon feeling good about. So I think that his head coaching experience does affect sort of what he does as a general manager. He has been a very bold general manager. He went out at this free agency as it opened up, and of course signed Steven Stamkos, Jonathan Marchessault, really changing the trajectory of the Nashville Predators for the next 2 to 3 seasons. And that played a part in moving on from Yaroslav Askarov as well. But he's really not afraid to make the decisions that he feels like sets this team up, both short term to be a contender, but also isn't sacrificing the long-term viability by trading away too many picks or prospects. So he's really right now got Nashville in a sweet spot, and it's just going to be up to the team to see what they do with this opportunity.
Yeah, 3 first-round picks, certainly, an opportunity to replenish the system while still in win-now mode. Not too many teams get to claim that. How comfortable is the organization with the backup goalie situation? Scott Wedgewood going to be the guy?
Scott Wedgewood is going to be the guy. Of course, UC Saros signed this huge 8-year deal, which sort of began the end of the Yaroslav Askarov future in Nashville. But then Barry Trotz went out and signed Scott Wedgewood to a 2-year deal. And here is the difference in why, and this is why Barry Trotz went about this decision. When you have Yaroslav Askarov coming in, and if he were to be your backup, your expectation of Askarov would be gain NHL experience, get better in net. But in more of a win now mode, what they need from a backup goaltender is somebody who can step in for UC Saros and keep the team winning. And Scott Wedgewood has a lot more experience in the NHL, and we really saw that he's able to do that. He did that last season with the Dallas Stars when Ottinger was out with injury. He stepped in and was really able to keep the team moving forward. So Scott Wedgewood is going to be the backup guy, and I think people should feel very comfortable with that move. I think it really shores up any sort of issue that would arise, say UC Saros, knock on wood, were to get injured. You have a backup goaltender that can come in, can play a lot of games, who has that experience, who can play under pressure and really keep the team moving forward to being more of a contender this season.
A lot of changes on this team over the course of the offseason. How concerned are you about sort of the chemistry, especially early in the year?
I think you have to be realistic about it. It is so exciting to look on paper at the Nashville Predators roster, but you have to remember players like Steven Stamkos has played his entire career with one franchise. And not only is he now playing for a different team, he's now moving to a different state, to a different city. And all of those off-ice changes matter too. Now, he is the consummate professional. And so I do think that the Predators are going to be very glad to have him on the team. The same thing for Jonathan Marchessault. I think you've got two players coming in who feel like they have something to prove, and that's a great kind of attitude to harness. But I do think Predators fans need to be patient because it is going to take time to build some of that chemistry. Last season, we saw almost instant chemistry with Ryan O'Reilly, Gustav Nyquist, and Philip Forsberg, and they became one of the most effective lines in the league. That's the exception. I don't know that that's the rule when it comes to bringing in new players. So we're going to have to be patient at the start of the season. And it's not an easy schedule coming in October for the Predators. So I think we need to kind of expect some ups and downs as the team sort of gets used to each other, as the new players adjust to Andrew Burnett's system. And then I really think this is a team that has potential to make a deeper postseason run.
Should be exciting. What any other concerns heading into training camp right now?
I think the biggest concern really was alleviated by wrapping up the Yaroslav Askarov situation. That was a situation that was going to overshadow everything that Barry Trotz is working for, everything that Andrew Burnett is doing, because even though you've added Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault and Brady Shea, and this is a really exciting time for the Predators, what Yaroslav Askarov did and the way he went about it really was going to be the big story. And so I feel like Barry Trotz did a great job wrapping that situation situation up. I think going into training camp, we're going to have to see how some of the younger players fit into the roster. I think one player to watch is Tommy Novak. The expectation is he's going to maybe be your second line center. Is he ready to step into that role for the Nashville Predators? Luke Evangelista, great season last season. Can he continue to build on what he did in the second half of last season for the Predators? So keep an eye on some of these younger players, even as you watch these new veterans get used to a new system and a new city and a new team.
I know it won't be dull. Lots to look forward to in Nashville. And why don't you tell our viewers and our listeners where they could find the podcast and where they could find you and your co-host on social media?
You can follow the podcast on social media at LO_Predators. Of course, you can find us on your favorite podcasting platform, and we are on YouTube as well. You can follow me on social media at AnnK_Mama on Ice.
All right. Ann, thanks so much. Always a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Gil.
Today's episode is brought to you by your friends at FanDuel. You've heard a lot about FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel anytime. And look, hockey fans, you can check out hockey futures on FanDuel. You've got baseball going, football futures, college football coming back. Lots of odds to check out at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook.